Hey, welcome to BreitWerks. What are you looking at? This is an AC blower motor. So you'll recognize this car from some of our other videos. Car went home, runs amazing, owner loved it. Couple weeks into the hot summer, guess what happened? The old motor gave up. So you can see I'm moving it and it doesn't really want to move. So it would operate, but it was blowing fuses, and then once it got warm, it was rattling, making noise. So yeah, it made it through all of its prior tests, but hey, under use, it shit the bed. So what we've got to do is we've got to get this guy out and this guy in there. So this is the Wurzelmeister or something. He's got a cool name for it, but it's a more efficient fan. So we're going to go ahead and put that in, and that should increase the air movement inside the car. And on top of that, we'll make a separate video about that. We're going to replace the switch with his digital upgrade. So we'll see. You know, these things don't always work on fan speed 1 and 2. They'll really kind of work on 3. But apparently this little upgrade works better with the new motor, and you have more control over the fan speed. So it doesn't always have to be a hurricane in there. All right, so we're gonna get on with it. We're gonna pull out the last 2 bolts and get the bracket that holds this motor out. And then we have to modify that bracket because this guy goes in there. The thing I'm worried about is getting the cage off of the old shaft. I mean, you can kind of see this has been there for a while. So we'll see. We haven't had too much luck with those, but hey, we're gonna give it a go. So I'm gonna get this apart, and when we find something cool, I'll bring you along. All right, well, the great news is we were able to get the cage off of the old motor without too much fanfare. But yeah, you probably just heard the little squeak when I spun the motor. Now, the trepidation here is you have to cut out the center support. So we've cut out the center support, and the instructions simply say get it as flush as possible. So I'm going to test fit it, see if I need to take those down any more flush, because these are kind of reinforcements, right? These arms run out to where the attachment hardware is. So we don't want to totally get rid of them because we don't want this box to crack. But yeah, so making those cuts, because what this guy did do was he was how the motor sat in here. There was one thing in the instructions that was missing a little bit. Over here, these are the connectors for the harness that was in there. And this harness kept getting caught up, wouldn't let me slide the motor out of this holder. So you have to pull the harness off, and there's a little clip that holds the harness on. So the instructions talk about the 4 clips that hold the motor in, for sure. But that one, and as I was moving it, I was like, ooh, it doesn't want to go. And I really did not want to crack anything. So just, you know, as Griff would tell you himself, use some common sense. So as these guys are coming out, if you choose to do this fan upgrade, just pull that harness off, and then this guy will slide out pretty easily. So now that we've got this apart, next step is to mock this up, and there's some specific orientations. So we're gonna do that before we drill any holes, but that's our next step. All right, so the next tricky part here, first you gotta find yourself something to be able to set everything in. They recommend a coffee can. This old cracked fan ring worked perfect. Basically, you're just trying to get it up off the ground, but you need to be on the OD of the plastic piece. So find something. If you've got an old fan ring sitting around, it works perfectly well. Then the other challenge that you have, this guy needs to be centered, right? So there's really no locating holes or any locating points. So the recommendation is find a socket that has the right size OD to make sure that it fits in all areas. So the one that I'm using right now in particular is a 15 millimeter 3/8 Stall Willie socket. So the OD, the outside of this guy, you can see it. Slide him in here. He's a little tight, little tight, little tight, little tight, So it's basically centered. Now, we're not doing anything, you know, this isn't rocket science. It doesn't need to be 1/100th of a millimeter accuracy. But it's got to be kind of in the middle, otherwise your cage is going to impact something. And then the other piece, you know, it's RTFM, right? Read the fucking manual. But he clearly says put your harness at 7 o'clock, right? This gets indexed up. This is your outlet tube. That gets indexed up, and then put the harness out, the output of the harness at 7 o'clock. So roughly 6, we're close to 7. And then this guy's gonna probably snake around the same way that the factory one did. But that is in a different orientation than where the factory locating was. So again, read the instructions. He wrote them, you might as well read them. So we are in a good spot. I'm gonna go grab a silver Sharpie, mark these holes so that we can drill those holes right in those spots, and then we'll install the attachment hardware. But yeah, who knew an old fan ring would actually have a purpose? So much for that. All right, we're gonna get on with making holes. All right, we're working on our test fit here. So we've got our box bolted. They're not metric hardware, but I used a 6.5 millimeter on one side and a 9 on the other. But yeah, I don't even have non-metric tools. I have toolboxes on toolboxes, but no non-metric tools. Now here's what's interesting. Check this out. There's the motor, right? And there's just such a very small amount of clearance. Now, this is supposed to work for boxes up to 1985. And basically what it needs is the dimple. So we are now gonna test fit the cage and make sure that all this stuff actually works. So we've got our cage. It's gonna sit down in there with just a hint of clearance so that it doesn't do that while it's spinning. All right, we're gonna get on with it, getting close. Got the cage on. So there's just a touch of protrusion, and I didn't mess with the balance or the weights that are on the squirrel cage there. I kind of just absolutely left all that stuff alone. Not trying to mess that up. You can see there's a little protrusion on the shaft, so you could come out a little bit further. But my rationale for setting it where I set it was silly wires. Anyway, my rationale for setting it where I set it is that right here, right, so this is the suction side. It's pulling the air up through the evaporator, and you don't want any gap between the fan blades, or the squirrel cage blades, and this, because that's creating, you know, down here, you're just blowing air out of this hole. But here, you actually, the efficiency on sucking the air up through the evaporator is what I was going for there. So that's why I set it in the direction that I did. I don't know, it may bite me in the butt. I've spun it a bunch. It does not seem to rub, but hey, we'll drive it around for a week after we install this to make sure it works perfectly. But anyway, the only thing left to do is put in these 2 screws that don't go in the car body, and that's it. So certainly an accomplishable task, not a tremendous number of tools. Mainly these are just little clips that you get off with needle nose. So kind of cool. So we're gonna finish this video out. Give you one more look inside there at the, yeah, the clearance isn't too bad down there either. But this is the upgraded fan motor, and we'll do another video because we're gonna put the special controller in to really take advantage of this. But once you've got this box top off, if you haven't replaced your evaporator, do that while you have this out. Because fortunately, the way we reinstalled this one, I was able to get the box top without taking anything else apart. But if you've got the original clips and all that stuff on there, you need an evaporator anyway. So don't just change this fan, do the whole system. All right, have a fantastic Get it? Fantastic day, and check us out at BreitWerks.com. Thanks for watching.